Welcome back to Economic Outlook. Today I want to continue my discussion of energy consumption in the developing world. In my previous two entries, I examined energy consumption in both developed markets and emerging economies. Today I want to look at the actual amount of energy consumed in each of these different types of economic structures. It's possible to compare the aggregate energy usage of BRIC countries to their more developed counterparts by using equivalent energy. Equivalent energy converts a country's total energy consumption into comparable units, in this case, tons of oil. It's important to note that the following figures don't reflect petroleum consumption alone. All of a country's energy expenditures are converted to the mass of oil that would produce the same amount of energy. Because the oil is measured as a mass and not a volume, conversion to barrels is hard to do since the density of oil varies. Basically, 1 ton of oil is roughly equal to 7 barrels, but this measure can change depending on the quality of oil in question. The results of the comparison between BRIC and developed country gross consumption in 2005 reinforces earlier observations and reveals new insights. First, the gap between BRIC and developed countries' transportation energy consumption increases. The developed world used almost twice as much total energy on transportation as the BRIC countries. Similar gaps exist for residential and commercial energy use. Gross energy consumption amplifies the gap between developed and emerging countries. Another important observation relates to industrial energy consumption. The previous chart showed that emerging countries spent more of their energy resources on industrial production. However, advanced economies use more energy in their own industrial production than do the BRIC countries. This reflects the difference in overall energy usage between the two groups. Developed countries are extremely energy intensive. Even though their proportional expenditures are below levels of the BRIC countries, they still use more energy to support their existing industrial infrastructure. The density of energy usage is a critical feature when comparing the prospects for developing nations' future energy consumption. It's also useful to look at energy consumption on a per capita basis to see how production shifts may occur in developing nations. Per capita consumption reflects the density of energy usage in the developed world. For example, the United States, European Union, and Japan use almost twice as much energy for transportation than the BRIC countries in 2005. On a per capita basis, this gap actually increases. The developed states use an incredible 12 times the energy per person purely for transportation needs. The developed world used the energy equivalent of 1.25 tons of oil per person. In contrast, the BRIC countries used only 1/10 of a ton per person. Residential and commercial energy consumption are also much higher on a per person basis. This reflects a more energy intensive, higher standard of living in the developed world, as well as a more robust consumer sector. Commercial services in the developed world use 13 times as much energy per person as they did in the BRIC countries. Another important quality the per capita analysis reveals is the disparity in energy use for industrial purposes. Developed countries use 3.3 times as much energy per capita on industrial production. Remember, on a relative basis, developing countries used 1.5 times as much energy in the industrial sector as did developed nations. The density of energy usage in the industrial sector is of critical importance to developing economies. The developed world has shifted its industrial forces to more energy-intensive production activities associated with high-value manufacturing processes. These include industries like automobile manufacturing in Japan, computer and defense technology in the United States, and industrial machinery in the European Union. It's important to note that these processes are energy-intensive, but not necessarily people-intensive. Developing countries allocate more workers to manufacturing processes that require more labor. The developed world uses more automation and more energy in its industrial manufacturing. Now that we've seen the differences in relative, gross, and per capita energy consumption in the developed world and in emerging economies, it's time to see what the implications are for these different trends. In my concluding entry to this series, we'll look at these very trends and see what kind of predictions we can make about energy consumption as developed markets become more advanced. I'll see you next time here on Economic Outlook, and be sure to check out my website at www.econoutlook.com. Thanks.